but have people in there. We have comrades who are already in that inferior pension system. Why aren't we mobilizing with them to improve their situation and make it an agenda that we can all fight for? Because we continue to say London Transport have the best pension fund going. Why aren't we fighting for the rest of the working class people in this country to have the best pension system going? So, you know, let's find common ground. If we're going to resist the idea that people will sell us out, it's controlling the agenda, controlling the narrative, setting our own agenda, and make sure that we fight on common ground. So, comrade, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to have Suresh in the room. I was worried you'd come in late. But Suresh Grover, I've known for over a decade, and I've known longer than that. I'm a boy from Southall, originally from Chandigarh, India. And although I wasn't in the same exact political faction as Suresh, he was always an inspiring figure to me. Because he was someone who stood up for Southall, as simple as that. He was someone I knew at the grassroots as a teenager, who was defiant, who was fearless, and also was associated with the most inspiring resistance and campaign of my youth, of my generation, which was the Stephen Lawrence family campaign, of which Suresh Grover was the family campaign coordinator. I love hearing Suresh speak. He's got incredible, excellent, sharp insight into history and politics and ideology. So please, a warm welcome to Suresh.
I'm sorry I'm late. Actually, I have to say that the last 3 years have been the busiest in my life, not the least inactive. And I've been going around since 1976, when Jagga was killed in Southall in a racial murder, and we created the Southall Youth Movement, etc. I was asked to speak on racism and trade unions, so I just want to do justice to what I've been asked to do, but pick on some of the points which could have been said. I think there is a pattern here from post-war in terms of the discrimination that black, brown workers, migrant workers suffer, and the response of the trade unions. Let me just spell it out in a couple of minutes. Britain recruited us and our fathers and mothers to repair a war-torn economy. And for that, our parents, grandparents worked in the factories, foundries, railways, the National Health Service, cleaned the streets, and we repaired. We were the equivalent of the Marshall Plan that was imposed on Japan after the Second World War, after it was devastated by nuclear bombs. That's the gravity. And when I say black, I include Irish within that experience of colonialism and brought as labour. But the fruits of that labour were never shared with black, brown communities. In fact, what happened was we were placed in inner city conurbations on the margins in the rubble of cities. Brixton, Southall, Bradford, Lum Lane, Moss Side in Manchester, we can name all the cities, St. Paul's in Bristol, etc. And with the collective resistance experience we had in India, Pakistan, Caribbean, Africa, we built communities. And we fought for equality of wages and unionization in factories. Wolf Rubber in Southall is the first strike that took place in the 1950s. Sorry, it's actually not the first. It is, sorry. Wolf Rubber in Southall is the first strike takes place, where Punjabi workers are recruited, not given equal pay, worked in unsociable conditions, and they want to unionize. The white workers do not let them unionize. And they begin to rely on the communities of support within Southall to build that strike over 9 months. We lose. Bristol bus strike. The boycotting by black workers of the Bristol bus service because white workers refused to share or allow black workers to be conductors on this stuff. It's a pivotal part of the history. They campaigned. They relied on their communities. But they won that campaign over a period of time. I could go into the details, but I'm imperial typewriters, 1971, near Leicester. I actually went to the strike. Magnificent solidarity, resistance. Well, actually, Gujarati workers in Leicester, months of strike, starvation, because they didn't have that support. Simply because white workers did not want them to unionize. And the argument was migrant labour reduces the wage gap. Their argument, it's an argument that was put by social democracy on the left for a long period, and still is by social democracy. Grundig. I know everybody talks about Grundig, but just let me tell you what happens at the end, because nobody talks about it.
That's right.
Magnificent. I remember two periods. I actually remember 3 moments of Grundig. One is going and see Jayab and Desai and other people when the strike first happened. And her comments about we are the lions and we are not the monkeys if we put in a cage. Everybody knows about that. And then the miners come and support it. I remember Dolly's Hill. It's packed with warmth and solidarity. And then the trade union, the left, desert the strikers.
Yep.
And she's on her own,
That's right.
outside the DNGW, hunger striking
That's right.
for the strike to be concluded. Nobody remembers that, but I remember. And then she dies, and she's a pivotal figure for that history of support, resistance, and then betrayal. And I actually a trade unionist when I was doing the Southall Youth Movement stuff. I was a postman in Southall, and I worked I wasn't in the RMT, I was in the ASTEF. And it's one of the worst experiences of my life. And on the first day I was told, at that time I didn't know RMT, I didn't think it existed. ASTEF, I became guard. The driver comes in, motorman, what we used to call it that time. He said, your place is here, my place is here, on Metropolitan Line. And that was cool. And that for 9 months, okay? So, and I was based at Baker Street because I did the Metropolitan and Circle Line. The amount of suicides and injuries of permanent way people who repaired is shocking. Disproportionately black or brown was actually. There's a lot of stuff. Common kitchen in Heathrow Airport, where black workers, Asian workers, not allowed to use the same kitchen as white workers. We're talking about 1980s stuff. I remember them because they were strike-based at the PNGW headquarters in Southall. That was the organizer stuff. Go on, I know. Come to modern period, that history. Look at it. Coronavirus. Now I happened to work throughout the coronavirus period. I went everywhere. And I went to all the marches of DLM marches. And I have a slightly different version in the way that you're reflecting it, and I'll tell you why. Coronavirus, in terms of the strand I've picked up, shows not just the failure of the government, and I don't even want to talk about it. We have people that we know how terrible this government is, class-oriented, it's elitist, it's run by multinationals. I don't want to even go there because we know what it is. The National Health Service also failed workers and the trade union movement. You have in the National Health Service and within the gig economy and in the night economy about 3 million workers who worked through the coronavirus period. Mainly women actually, 60% women. Irish, Filipino, black, Asian, Syrian, whatever. And they are not just paid pittance, but they don't have a choice because the level of salaries not to self-isolate, not to work. They're forced into those positions. And in the health service, you have all the discussions with the trade unions on race equality frameworks that existed to create a safe environment for black and brown workers. A lot of nurses died because the management forced them and the union did not resist them working in that period of time. And it's not even a class issue because the management in this issue, in the coronavirus, what was key wasn't just the impact of people who were poor that were dying, and there were large numbers of them, and I'm involved in the inquiry that looks at COVID with some of the black families that are involved in it. But the explanation by the National Health Service that people who died have either one or two diseases or both diseases or comorbidities, which is they are vulnerable because they're suffering from two diseases, or because they come from bad socioeconomic conditions. It doesn't even apply to consultants who die. They're rich, they're powerful, yet they died because their union didn't support them going in operational with face masks. And that's why you have the disproportionality. That stream of racism, insipid racism, or what is known as institutionalized racism, exists from post-war right up to this point. I went throughout the country on Brexit. I totally opposed Brexit, not because I don't think, I know the class position on it, but it was the most vitriolic anti-immigrant campaign that I've ever seen since I've ever been in this country. Every election is peppered and laced with anti-immigrant sentiments. But this particular election was the most furrowed anti-immigrant and actually affected some of the black left. Yeah. They actually left on it. In Southam, there are about 15% who voted it because they were influenced by the black left, who said, I don't want Polish to come in this area, I'd rather have people from India come.
A lot of people said
I saw that on the streets. It makes me angry because racism in that period became uncolor-coded. Migrant workers from Polish suffered the same fucking discrimination that we did. It's historic. And that sentiment streams. And there is a question that we have to ask about how trade unions have responded to that. And at every stage, apart from some exceptions, some exceptional basis, it's been unsupported, or silent, or at best, anger at the most ferocious attack that takes place. But they've never explained or understood anti-racism. So they can't explain it to their workers or their workforce, and they allow people like Nigel Farage, ex-Stokeburger, to become a leader of the working class in that period. Husker and hustlers like that. That's our weakness. That's the weakness of the trade union movement. And its weakness derives from not the genuine nature and compassion that exists amongst individual trade unions. I've seen a lot of trade unions in my mind who would die for people like me. It's their link to social democracy and the link with the Labour Party bureaucracy. And you know what the debate has been between Lenin and all that stuff on this issue. That's the first strand I want to speak about. The second strand is, look, when it comes to racism, there's been many debates within the left about racism, going back from the discussions between the Bolshevik Party and nationalism 100 years ago. Because Lenin's position was nationalism of different communities is likely to be reactionary. We've seen that in Ukraine, for example. It's a classic example. And the debate between him and M.N. Roy, anti-colonialist, forced him to revise his position of nationalism in colonized countries, imperialist countries, can be positive. So first landmark change that takes place where race and class are being discussed by revolutionaries. That's why you have the beginning of the black Bolsheviks in America, in this country, gravitating towards Russia. It's a pivotal moment in history. Then you come to this debate about slavery, proclamation, and how that is seen. The importance of that is not, as Glenn has said, the debate isn't led by Wilberforce, but the French Revolution is directly connected to the slave rebellions in Haiti and Dominica Republic. Had they not won, the French Revolution would have never spoken about fraternity, equality, and whatever. It's directly connected. You can show it historically, people speak about it. More important, the lens that you see slavery is from the eyes of the resistors. C.L.I. James explains that, and other people explain it. For the first time in a Eurocentric world, you have an anti-racist, anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist view being opposed in this country. And it's very important. That is the radical shift that takes place. Okay? And then you have state racism. Critical mass in terms of how, this country, I think, as Srikant said, I was the coordinator of the Stephen Lawrence family campaign for me, the Lawrence campaign is a process. It's a campaign that you have to understand the process. It's not about Baroness Lawrence becoming close to Starmer. I don't think she should have done that. I think that's capitulation of what we did. But you need to understand the context. State racism is the foundation of other forms of racism. It gives credence to far-right views. It gives fuel to popular racism. Jeremy Clarkson talking about this, Boris Johnson talking about this. It also legitimizes different forms of individual behavior among some people. If I say that to state, we can sort it out. It's prejudicial issues. But state racism kills. And you can see from, so you want me to finish? Yeah, okay. State racism is killed over 1,007 in custody. Right. Last point, I want to just finish. I see, to be honest with you, I've been involved in campaigns of self-defense, rebellions, burned pumps where skinheads been so they can come to Southall, did the Bradford 12. The left has never been involved in self-defense community campaigns. For them to say that they have or not, there's been pivotal points where populist education on anti-Nazi have been gravitated because they haven't seen, and we have to understand why that happened. So it's not about whether the left is strong or not, but it's decisive. What's decisive is the crushing of the communist movement generally has weakened the debate and the narrative within the working class. Whether you're Stalinist, Trotskyist, Maoist, it doesn't actually mean it has impacted on all of us. And that's why we're in that pulverizing situation. And as a result, what anti-racism is creating family justice campaigns. And that lingering, shouting, screaming of individuals is because of the defeat that we suffer, not because we've created that strategy and it came out of a movement. It is to a transitory, response, resilience, resistance to what the situation is. I see a lot of people active. I mean, mutual aid, poverty stuff, every town I have been to, I've seen that. There are thousands of people who are involved in environmental campaigns. I've been to the marches. I don't support all the tactics. Yeah. I'm in favor of direct action totally. And I think the state is scared of that. And I don't think you can say it's totally absence of any stuff. Yes, it's not organized left vanguard groups, but actually in this country, very little has come from the vanguard left. And I actually understand it. So we have to think of different ways of structure. And Granville, yes, is poisonous because of the state, how it functions, but there is a grass movement around it. It's not strong, it wants to be quiet because it doesn't want to distill and create anger in the state. And that's because of dilution of funds and the gravity of the stuff that took place. So I think there is a hopeful sign forward, but we need to understand the context and the impact of